Hey everybody, it is Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to my top 10 alt accounts. An alternate account is really technically anything you want it to be, just another account that you can play the game differently on, but for these methods, I'm going to be focusing on money-making alts. These are secondary accounts that are used to help fund things on your main normally. The judgment on these methods is going to be based on how AFK or how much you can multitask the method, how much money the method makes, and how difficult it might be to get the requirements for these money makers. Keep in mind, this is just my personal top 10. It is very possible your list could differ a lot, and this is not going to be a guide for each method. It is simply a list. I will link any guides that I have for these methods in the description. I do appreciate all the support lately, everybody. If you have been enjoying the videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and you can check out my Twitch for more content, which the link will be in the description too. To get started, I have a magic method with some mid-level requirements. Making teletabs in your house is a nice AFK moneymaker that gives pretty decent magic XP, and actually has been featured in a couple of my guides lately because it is a solid method. You want pretty high construction level, with 76 being ideal, but construction levels are pretty quick, so if you were to supply the money from your main, that would be pretty quick to get those levels, and it's not that expensive just to get to 67. At 40 magic, you can start making house tabs, which are generally very high in demand, so tend to be consistent profit. You can do these up to 60 magic and then change over to Bones to Peaches, though you would have to do the mage training arena stuff to unlock that spell, which tends to turn folks off of that. You can make up to 1400 tabs an hour when using a butler. At the moment, house tabs would get you 300k GP an hour and 42k XP an hour. Bones to Peaches tabs are a little closer to 600k GP an hour, so doubling your profit and then a little bit more XP at 50k an hour. Teletabs are pretty AFK and low requirement, and the profit, it really isn't too bad in the long run, so I almost put them up higher on the list, but I decided they could start this one off. My number 9 spot is taken up by possibly the least AFK method on this list. Blast Furnace is what I used to make money on my alt while I was training 99 Slayer and I was saving up the loot tab. Without selling off my loot from Slayer, I needed money for supplies elsewhere, so I was doing that by doing Blast Furnace occasionally, paying for a pretty good chunk of the supplies. Blast Furnace is pretty low requirements. You need 30 smithing for steel bars, and you should probably grind out a coal bag from the Motherlode mine, but that's doable in like a day or two. High agility can help out with Blast Furnace speeds, especially if you were to get your graceful clothing, but it is not needed for an alt. Any agility training that you're willing to get in is going to help though, so if you did like 10 minutes here and there, you would at least get a few levels out of the way, and that would be nice. Blast Furnace can make you a lot of money from pretty low levels, and even if you're trying to do something else in the main, you could maybe cut the rates in half or so, and you still would be getting solid bonus cash. The potential in the long run is that you could make a mil plus an hour with room bars. It is fairly high requirement and takes some good multitasking skills, but this depends on what you're doing in the main too. Maybe if you're working through some crappy skilling grinds, you've got time to be making bank on the alt. I'm personally a big fan of moneymakers that can make decent cash at the low end of it, but have a high ceiling where you can make pretty good money if you're putting in the full effort. The Giant Mole is a beginner difficulty boss that can be multitasked pretty easily. To kill the Giant Mole doesn't take very high stats, but it is recommended to be 70 attack, strength, and defense so you can wear your Darox gear. It's also suggested to have a Falador Hard Diary complete, because that way your Falador shield will show you where the Giant Mole is in its lair. It also drops noted mole claws and mole skins if you have the hard diaries done, which is going to make for much longer trips. This does add a lot of requirements, but without the diaries, the kills and cash is going to be a lot slower. Overall, the mole has very little KO potential, and even if it does knock you out, it's very easy to get back in time to grab your stuff, so it does not require your full attention by any means. The mole is very consistent cash since the money is based off of 100% drops. You're unlikely to land over a mil an hour, especially if you're not max combat with top tier gear, but if we're considering that to be bonus money, then this is just on your alt. This is a pretty good method. The Giant Mole does have a pet option, which for some players could be a turnoff since you'd rather a pet on your main than on your alt, but I know for myself I've had an alt account long enough with no pets that I think it would be pretty cool to actually land one. In the number 7 spot, I've got the entire skill of Fletching, but we're going to be focused on cutting logs into unstrung bows for this section. Most logs to unstrung longbows do profit, but maple logs are the first time that you're going to see any reasonable cash, and unstrung yew longbows tend to be your best option for AFK Fletching money making. You do need 70 Fletching to make unstrung yew longs, but you can get to 70 Fletching on an alt in under 24 hours from making the account, so this really isn't much of a requirement. You also don't need a big cash stack to get started on this either, since the yew logs are so cheap, and and maple logs might as well be free at this point. The low requirements make this a good alt method for new alt accounts, but this also is a very good AFK method. You can string bows for a similar profit, sometimes even more money, but you can only do 14 bows per inventory. When you're cutting the logs into unstrung bows, you get 27 per inventory, which makes for a lot more AFK time. The exact profits that you'll be making always depend on the price at the time that you buy and sell, of course. I usually expect an average of 100 to 150k an hour from fletching. This is not a lot of money, which is why it's pretty low on the list, but the requirements are very low. And again, the AFK life comes into factors, so this is a good beginner method for making money with an alt. Crafting gold jewelry requires very low crafting levels and even less money since gold bars are so cheap, and it's also very AFK. Not only crafting gold jewelry will make a profit, in fact, most jewelry tends to make a little bit of profit, but if you were adding a gem to the jewelry, then similar to unstrung bows compared to stringing them, you can only do 14 per inventory, in this case 13, rather than 27, so doing gold jewelry is a lot more AFK. To buy enough gold bars to last an hour only costs 112k at the moment, so it's very easy to supply an alt with enough money to get started with these. And if you only bought 1 hour worth of gold bars, then went and made a bunch of gold bracelets, you would have enough money for a few hours then, and after a few trips to the GE, which is right next to this furnace, you'd be able to supply yourself for quite some time. Gold bracelets only require 7 crafting to get started. With bracelets, you're going to make around 200k an hour, which is some of the best money you can make with only a level 7 requirement. At level 8, you can make unstrung gold amulets, which tend to profit less than bracelets, but they are a free-to-play method. In general, if you're looking to make an alt for extra cash, you should kind of treat it like a main and be willing to get the higher requirements to make more money, and I would include buying bonds for membership in this discussion, but for those who don't have a lot of hours to make up for bond money, sometimes the free-to-play methods can be a savior. Bonds are pretty expensive at the moment too, which is a little rough for alts living off of bonds, unfortunately. You don't get bad crafting XP with some of these early methods, so pretty quickly you'd be able to decide if you wanted to upgrade to other jewelry. And in the long run, if you really took a crafting alt seriously, you could definitely get a crafting cape while profiting, which could also be pretty helpful for other alt moneymakers since it's an awesome bank teleport. To start the second half of my list, I do have a combat moneymaker, which to be honest, most of this second half is combat related. Skeletal Wyverns require 72 Slayer to kill, and they're one of the more OG Slayer monsters to grind out for money. Wyverns can be killed with either melee or range. Generally, melee is going to kill them faster and technically cost you less money since you're not using ammo, but it's also slower to get a new account ready for meleeing Wyverns rather than ranging them. And if you're using a Dragon Hunter crossbow, speed is not going to be an issue here. Wyverns can get remotely crowded, though not nearly as bad as it was a few years back. They did add that Slayer-only room, and with more monsters being added to the game too as good moneymakers, there's other options for players, which means less of them are here. Overall, ranging the Wyverns, you can safe spot really easily and take 0 damage, often making trips last longer, which helps when it comes to crowded worlds. Some players offer to run supplies back and forth from the bank for you for a fee, which can help with trip length, but I've never really bothered with that myself. Your profits will be remotely consistent from Wyverns. The Wyvern bones are like dragon bones, and if you're going for really long trips, you're probably ignoring them, but they are a 100% drop. They have decent alchs, which add up over time, and a few rare drops like Dragon Plate Legs and a Dragon Plate Skirt, which are 160k a piece. Don't forget about the Draconic Visage, which is an insanely rare piece at a 1 in 10k, but it's also a very nice bonus when grinding out on an alt. Overall, depending on your levels and your gear, I'd expect anywhere from 500k to 700k an hour fighting Wyverns. At number 4, I've got another Slayer monster with Gargoyles. 2 or so years ago, the Gargoyles drop table received a very significant update, giving it more alchables and even solid straight-up cash drops. This monster was definitely fairly useless for its Slayer requirement, but with that update, it's now one of the Slayer monsters you look forward to at low levels. You need 75 Slayer to fight Gargoyles, and they require a Rock Hammer to kill. Gargoyles can be AFK'd if you're either using Protection Prayers, which is a little pricey, or if you're just wearing Guthan's armor, then you're very unlikely to die in here. And again, even if you do die while AFKing too hard, it's really easy to get your stuff back. Getting an alt to 75 Slayer might seem like a bit of a task, but for a few of these top alts, I do have some high requirements. If you want to make more money, you should expect higher requirements in general. In this case, we've got fairly high requirement moneymaker that is very easy to multitask and could be done on multiple alts if you were feeling good. It's really that simple to do. Gargoyles do have a Slayer boss option called the Grotesque Guardians, which you do need to be on a Gargoyles task to fight. These actually make worse money than the regular ones, which on the surface sounds pretty stupid, but that's just a statement for how good the regular ones have it. The Gargoyle drop table was updated before the boss came out, so when they were making the boss, they would have to make the Grotesque Guardians a better profit than even the Abyssal Sire, which is a higher level boss. and they even stated that the Guardians were going to be a mid-level boss, which means it shouldn't be making more money. Overall, I expect around 500 to 600k GP an hour Gargoyles when I'm just AFKing them. This really does depend on your stats and gear and luck a little bit, but if you're doing it for a lot of hours, your luck should even out. They are a lot nicer to multitask than Wyverns in my opinion, since you can use Guffins to never have to focus on eating, and you don't have to bank often or worry about it getting too crowded. To start off my top 3, I have possibly the controversial pick of the list since it makes the least money as far as I can see. Cannonballs only require 35 smithing and the Dwarf Cannon quest, which is a very easy beginner quest. Cannonball profits max out just under 200k depending on the prices when you do it, of course, but low requirements and insane AFK do make up for that. You can make Cannonball alts from scratch in like an hour off of Tutorial Island, especially if you're supplying it with a main. For anyone who already has an alt account with some stats on it, this might not matter much to you, but if you're just starting an alt and wondering what to do, this makes for a very good first choice. One inventory of Cannonballs takes your character a few minutes to get through, which means you could even complete multiple boss kills depending on what you're fighting, like maybe Zora. It's also very consistent AFK. Unlike fishing or woodcutting, when you never know when you need to move on to the next area, Cannonballs are always the same speed, so it's pretty easy to check your inventory and realize how long you have until you have to click it again. This is another alt option that you could make multiple alts to do it. I'd personally rather do a better moneymaker than try to run 3 accounts at a time, but Cannonballs are AFK enough. You could probably do like 8 of these and be okay. They really take no effort. I did mix in Cannonballs on my smithing alt during my original 99 Slayer series. I mentioned earlier I was using Blast Furnace to supply things, and that is true for most of the money. Blast Furnace makes a lot more per hour, so it would pay for a lot more tasks, but when I need the extra AFK time, especially if I was fighting a boss, I went right to Cannonballs. Cannonball prices have been very up and down lately, but they do correspond with the steel bar prices, so the profits tend to be pretty consistent. I normally expect anywhere from 150 to 200k GP an hour and 10 to 13k XP an hour. At the number 2 spot, I have our final Slayer monster, which is going to be Brutal Black Dragons. Brutal Black Dragons require 77 Slayer to kill, and they are insanely easy to multitask with. If you have Dragonfire protection and you stand at a distance while protecting from magic, these dragons can't do any damage to you. Even if you mess up and stand too close, or you let your prayer run out, or maybe your anti-fire potion, getting back to the dragon's lair takes about a minute, and you're not going to lose anything, other than maybe your dignity. The Brutal Black Dragons have a very solid drop table with 100% double dragon hides, lots of rune items, and stackables. When they first came out, they didn't have a Slayer requirement, but they were better cached than Wyverns, while arguably being more AFK than Gargoyles. Of all the alt methods, I've probably got the most hours into this one. I don't quite do this on my alt, but while I'm working on my hardcore, if I still need to make cash on the main, I'll bring it over to Brutal Black Dragons. You don't need a T-bow or a Dragon Hunter crossbow to make good money from these. A blowpipe still is going to profit well, but the top tier gear makes a big difference overall. I normally expect right around 1 mil an hour while I'm fighting Brutal Black Dragons, but even with the worst gear setup, you could probably manage 500k to 600k an hour, which is a little slower than Gargoyles, but this is also far easier to multitask, which gets a huge thumbs up from me for alt money making. And for the number 1 spot, I've got yet another dragon. Rune Dragons are without a doubt the top tier alt in the game, and probably not a surprise for my number 1 pick. You need to complete the Dragon Slayer 2 quest to fight these, and you're going to want high combat stats and really solid gear. In other words, this is not a low requirement money-making method. In fact, it has the highest requirements on this list. Reasonably though, best method should have the highest requirements. These dragons aren't quite as AFK to fight as Brutal Black Dragons. They do hit fairly hard, but as long as you're wearing insulated boots, you really just need to keep an eye on your health a little bit. The loot table is even more juicy than the Brutal Black Dragons, starting with a guaranteed rune bar on each kill. There's a lot of rune alchables, stackables, and even some rares. The dragon limbs are a 1 in 800, currently worth about 3 mil. Dragon metal lump is a 1 in 5k, only about 1.5 mil. Plus you got that draconic visage though, which is actually at a lowered 1 in 8k drop rather than the usual 1 in 10k. I normally expect anywhere from 1.2 to 1.4 mil GP an hour with top tier gear, which is why I like to do these over Brutal Black Dragons when I get a chance to fight them. For me, it depends on what I'm doing in the hardcore for deciding between these and Brutal Blacks. If you need to focus on your other accounts a lot and not the alt, then Brutal Black Dragons are going to be better on that alt, because then you can multitask a little easier. But if you have more time to look away from your clients onto the alt account, Rune Dragons are a good plus if you have the stats and gear. Clearly, Brutal Black Dragons also take less time to get an alt ready for, but I still squeeze Rune Dragons in this number 1 spot. For me, these have made the most money for the amount of time that I put into them, so it's definitely been worth it. I think this wraps up my list of top 10 money-making alts, everybody. These are obviously not the only options for making alts in the game. In fact, you really can make an alt to do anything you want. If you're making an alt to make money, I would choose one of these options, though. Thank you very much for watching this video, everybody. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. I do stream on Twitch, I have a Twitter, and I have a Discord, which all links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and best of luck with your grind.